This is a planet completely ruled by monsters. They have sharp teeth, a bloodthirsty nature, and they even kill each other. They locate their prey by sound, recognize the scent of blood, and are capable of flight. Every time they are disturbed, they swarm the entire planet in overwhelming numbers in no time. Wherever they go, they leave nothing but scattered bones. As the apex predators of the food chain, they have no natural enemies. Their only weakness is their fear of light. Fortunately, this planet is surrounded by 3 suns, so for most of the time, the monsters hide underground, too scared to emerge, until one day, in the vastness of space, a commercial spaceship named Hunter was speeding through the skies of planet Tangier. The ship was fully loaded with cargo and 40 passengers, including the notorious killer Riddick. If nothing went wrong, they were supposed to arrive at their destination in 9 years. So, everyone on board, including the crew, entered a state of hibernation, but something went wrong. During its autopilot journey, the spaceship veered off course and accidentally flew into the tail of a powerful comet, where countless micrometeorites instantly penetrated the hull. The oxygen system was critically damaged, causing rapid air loss. With alarms blaring constantly, the 40 hibernation pods remained operational, but the captain, who was in hibernation, tragically died on the spot. The system detected the captain's lack of vital signs and immediately activated the emergency protocol, waking up the 2 other crew members in the hibernation pods. Pilots Carolyn and Greg were ejected from the pod, but it was too late. The spaceship had sustained severe damage, resulting in a total loss of control, plummeting toward an unknown planet like a bullet. The hull was violently torn apart, the atmosphere was close to failing, and the radio system was destroyed. There was no way to send out a distress signal. Carolyn quickly deployed the drag panels to slow the descent, but it was useless. The drag panels instantly snapped off, and the ship lost its balance. If no action was taken soon, the ship would crash, and everyone would perish without a trace. However, the rear of the ship was too heavy, making it impossible to adjust the flight path. With no other choice, Carolyn activated the auxiliary wings to lift the nose of the ship. She then jettisoned several cargo bays at the rear, hoping to lighten the load and give the ship a slim chance of surviving the crash landing, but the ship was still too heavy. At this point, the system prompted her, asking whether she wanted to eject the passenger compartments as well. In order to save herself, Carolyn decided to eject the passengers' cabins as well. As for the 40 dormant passengers, she decided to save herself first. She was about to try to abandon the cabin, but Greg wouldn't let her. He felt responsible for the passengers. If they wanted to survive, didn't the 40 passengers want to live too? To stop Carolyn, Greg unbuckled his seatbelt without hesitation and, risking his life, locked the rear cabin's air valve, preventing her from completing the procedure. He reminded Carolyn that she had 70 seconds left to resolve the crisis, but things rarely go as planned. At that moment, the windshield suddenly suffered a violent impact, and Carolyn instantly lost visibility. As the ship was about to crash, Carolyn had no choice but to desperately try to control the ship's attitude and force a landing. She prayed that she could survive the impact. Moments later, the ship smashed into the ground, skidding forward at high speed as the hull was torn apart. The hibernation pods were flung out of the cabin, and after several kilometers of sliding, the ship finally came to a halt. The immense impact nearly destroyed the vessel, leaving only half of the front intact. Judging by the path of the wreckage, the passengers who were thrown out likely didn't survive. When the dust settled, the survivors in the hibernation pods began to wake up one by one. A man who identified himself as Sheriff William immediately started counting the survivors, but he was suddenly attacked. Fortunately, he was tough enough to subdue the assailant, the dangerous convict Riddick. Carolyn was also unharmed, but kind-hearted Greg was tragically impaled by a pipe and died. However, his death wasn't in vain, because there were still 10 surviving passengers aboard the ship. The survivors stepped out of the wreckage and found themselves on a scorching and desolate planet. The oxygen was incredibly thin, making it hard to breathe. Fortunately, the planet had a gravity environment similar to Earth. Aside from the intense sunlight, there didn't seem to be any immediate danger. Everyone could still adapt. Now, their only option was to wait for rescue. Although the situation was grim, Carolyn had managed to keep calm under pressure and handled it well. Some of the passengers had survived thanks to her actions. The passengers, unaware of the full truth, expressed their gratitude to Carolyn for saving their lives. This made Carolyn feel deeply guilty. If it hadn't been for Greg, these people would already be dead, but that no longer mattered. Carolyn silently vowed to follow Greg's example and never abandon her team again. She would find a way to get everyone out of there. While searching for supplies, Carolyn discovered that, in addition to the regular passengers, there was a bald prisoner being held in solitary confinement on the ship. William, who was in charge of him, told Carolyn that this guy's name was Riddick. He was a ruthless man, known as the most dangerous criminal in the entire universe. He had just escaped from a heavily guarded prison, but even a lion takes naps sometimes. Riddick had been caught by bounty hunters, and their mission was to transport him to a federal prison to serve his sentence. So, they had to keep a close eye on him. However, while everyone was busy searching for supplies, Riddick found a way to escape. Due to the numerous gaps in the ship caused by the crash, Riddick stood up. Despite the excruciating pain, he twisted his joints. Incredibly, this tough man dislocated his own shoulder and slipped his handcuffs through a crack. With little effort, he freed himself from his restraints and quietly left the ship. When William discovered this, Riddick was already nowhere to be found, adding yet another layer of danger to everyone's safety. Enraged, William immediately ordered everyone to arm themselves and warned them that this prisoner, Riddick, was a cold-blooded monster. He was now the most dangerous presence on this planet. But the survivors were more concerned about something else. If they didn't find water soon, they would die of thirst. Carolyn then organized the survivors to search for water before the sun went down. At that moment, Paris suddenly rushed back, saying that this planet was not as simple as it seemed. The group was shocked to find out that the planet was surrounded by 3 suns. One emitted blue light, while the other 2 gave off red light. It seemed like this was the legendary treacherous, and these suns cast light from every angle, leaving no shadows, which meant there would be no cool nights on this planet. Additionally, the ground was so dry that it was almost impossible to store water, making it difficult to find any water source, although they had found a crate of alcohol, which provided some temporary relief. The environment was so harsh and arid that their supplies wouldn't last long. They had to find water before the rescue ship arrived if they wanted to survive here. So, William distributed weapons to everyone and decided to split up to search for water, and if anyone encountered Riddick, they were told to shoot on sight. The group set out into action. One team stayed behind to guard the ship and bury the dead, while the other, led by William, ventured out under the blue sunlight to search for water farther away. Along the way, William kept reminding everyone not to let their guard down, as Riddick could ambush them at any moment. After some time, William spotted through binoculars a few large trees on a distant hill. Trees that they had never seen before. Where there are trees, there must be water, so they excitedly rushed over, but as they got closer, they were stunned. These were not trees at all but the massive skeletons of some unknown large creatures. For some reason, the remains had been piled up in the desolate valley, forming an awe-inspiring graveyard of giant beasts. The group couldn't help but wonder what could have wiped out such enormous creatures. The group cautiously made their way through the massive beast skeletons, staying alert the entire time, fearing that Riddick might suddenly appear and kill them. What they didn't realize was that Riddick, who had escaped earlier, was hiding right among the giant bones. He drew a bone knife from his waist, initially intending to silently kill both William and Carolyn without anyone knowing, but after overhearing their conversation and learning that Greg had sacrificed himself to protect the passengers, Riddick hesitated and decided to hold back. It seemed that no one had deliberately caused this disaster, so he simply cut a lock of Carolyn's hair as a keepsake and let them go. Once they left, Riddick headed straight for the ship's base camp, while the rest of the group continued exploring the valley. After passing through the beast graveyard, they discovered an astronaut toy lying on the ground. Carolyn was puzzled. Could there be signs of human activity here? The group pressed on, and sure enough, they stumbled upon a human research station, although it had been abandoned for years and was completely empty. Fortunately, the station was fully equipped. Not only did it have solar power systems, but there was also a plentiful water supply. What shocked them the most was that there was an escape ship at the station. However, the fuel was depleted, but it could fly again if they replaced the battery. It just so happened that the crashed ship had a spare battery, which instantly gave everyone hope, and they were overjoyed. Meanwhile, back at the crashed ship, the group there was attempting to repair it. Paris noticed strange noises coming from the rear of the ship. The boy peered through a gap and saw a strange man walking toward them. Could it be that Riddick had returned to kill them? The 3 of them immediately tensed up and hid by the door. Just as Sharon was about to swing a weapon, the boy shouted to stop her, nearly preventing a fatal mistake. It turned out that the man was another unexpected survivor, but as the man breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for having survived the crash, fate had other plans. He didn't escape his fellow survivors. John mistook the man for Riddick and shot him on the spot. Little did they know, Riddick was sitting high above, silently watching the entire scene unfold. Feeling guilty, John dragged the heavy corpse by himself, intending to bury the body in a pre-dug pit. Unexpectedly, he discovered that a hidden underground cave had appeared at the bottom of the pit. Curious, he bent down to investigate. The cave was deep and seemingly bottomless. Sparking his curiosity, he quickly cleared the opening and, holding a flashlight, prepared to explore it. However, in the next moment, accompanied by a beastly roar, John was suddenly dragged into the cave by an unknown creature. Although he tried to fight back with his gun, he was ultimately no match for it, leaving behind only his blood-curdling screams. The gunfire immediately alerted everyone else. They knew someone had been attacked, so they rushed to the scene, but there was no body, only bloodstains and Riddick, crouched nearby. Riddick still had a bone knife in his hand, and instinctively, everyone assumed he was the killer. Riddick realized what they were thinking but couldn't be bothered to explain and quickly turned to run. However, halfway through his escape, he was ambushed by William. William knew Riddick's weakness well and immediately ripped off Riddick's goggles. Riddick's eyes could see in the dark, but in bright light, they became a vulnerability. Blinded by the intense light, he was quickly knocked out. Once again, Riddick found himself captured. In the darkness, John was neither seen alive nor dead. Carolyn sensed that something was wrong and confronted Riddick, demanding to know where John's body was hidden. Riddick, however, calmly responded, "I didn't kill him. It's perfectly fine for you to suspect me, but I'm not the one you should be afraid of here." Carolyn didn't understand what Riddick meant, but she was growing more and more curious about this man. As she got closer, she noticed his unusual eyes. The boy saw this too and eagerly asked Riddick how he could get such cool-looking eyes. Riddick revealed that he had been imprisoned in a pitch-black dungeon for 10 years, enduring brutal fights and endless torture. In order to survive, he had secretly bribed a doctor to modify his eyes so that he could see in total darkness, but the trade-off was that in bright sunlight, he would be blinded, which is why he needed to wear goggles. Riddick admitted that he had killed many people, but John wasn't one of them, because he never killed innocent people. He then suggested that Carolyn should go into the cave to uncover the truth. Hearing this, Carolyn was skeptical but didn't want to wrongfully accuse anyone. She decided to investigate where John had disappeared. Carolyn, showing surprising courage, immediately tied herself to a safety rope and ventured into the cave. The deeper she went, the more an inexplicable sense of dread crept over her. When she finally reached the depths of the cave, she realized it was much larger than she had anticipated. The space seemed endless, with tunnels branching off in every direction, leading to small mounds outside. It looked like the nest of some creature. What she didn't notice was the movement of unknown creatures slithering through the darkness around her. As she found John's dismembered remains, a shadow suddenly darted past her, startling her. It was then that she realized she had wrongly blamed Riddick. Soon, the cave echoed with the deafening roars of monsters. A few terrifying creatures were slowly approaching her from the shadows, blocking her way back. Realizing the danger, Carolyn rushed toward the nearest exit, climbing up the tunnel as fast as she could. As she neared the narrow opening above, fear gripped her. Just as she was about to escape, the safety rope around her waist, meant to save her life, became a deadly restraint as her teammates above held onto it tightly. The rope, which was supposed to be her lifeline, now felt like a noose, and she was overcome with a sense of helplessness that nearly broke her. In her desperation, she screamed at the top of her lungs, hoping her teammates would hear her. Her teammates anxiously waited by the hole. Fortunately, the young boy heard her cries for help. The group quickly dug through the hole, working together to pull her out. But just as she narrowly escaped death and caught her breath, the creatures below grabbed hold of her safety rope. Thankfully, one of her teammates acted quickly and cut the rope that was being pulled downward. As they did, a shadowy figure flashed by in the cave below. It was clear now that these monsters were the true killers. Left with no other choice, William sought out Riddick. Faced with the unknown creatures of this Trisolaris planet, he knew the team had to be united against the external threat. But Riddick was the unstable factor in the group. Though executing him on the spot would have been an easy solution, William wasn't actually a real sheriff, he was just a bounty hunter. Even though he had a long-standing grudge against Riddick, William also knew how powerful Riddick was in battle, and he hoped Riddick could put aside their differences. William proposed that if Riddick followed his orders, he would set him free. After all, the monsters were their greatest enemy now. Riddick gave a dismissive snort and, in an instant, disarmed William of his weapon. He remarked that he could easily escape on his own if he wanted to, but with a common enemy looming, temporary cooperation was the smartest choice. However, Riddick added that he only followed his own orders. With that, he casually walked away, fearing that the underground creatures might reappear at any moment. the group hurriedly gathered essential supplies. They removed the energy batteries from the hunter ship and headed toward the abandoned research station, hoping to repair the small escape vessel. At this point, the most important thing for them was to escape from this terrifying planet. The group soon arrived safely at the abandoned research station. After inspecting the ship, Carolyn found that while there were no mechanical failures, the ship was so old and neglected that it needed 5 new batteries to power up for takeoff. This meant they would have to return to the crashed ship to retrieve the remaining batteries. The only way to transport them was to use the solar-powered vehicle to bring the remaining batteries back. However, no one was in much of a rush, as they believed they had plenty of time. After connecting the water source at the base to power, they successfully activated the automatic water collector. It seemed everything was going in the right direction with an abundant water supply. They even indulged in a celebratory drink, but they might have been celebrating a bit too soon. While Riddick was scouting the base, he noticed something strange. There were no signs that the previous occupants had left the planet. He tried to enter a warehouse but was blocked by a locked iron door. However, he didn't notice that the young disciple in the group had crawled through a gap and gone inside. After some investigation, the group discovered that the base was built by an expedition team, but no one knew what had happened to them. Riddick voiced what everyone was secretly thinking: they were probably all dead. If they had left normally, they wouldn't have left everything behind. While the group was still discussing this, Abu realized that the young disciple who had come with him was missing. The young disciple had wandered into a sample room. When he opened a skylight, sunlight flooded the dark room for the first time in ages, awakening a group of creatures hidden in the corners. The monsters, agitated and restless, scattered, scaring the young disciple as he sprinted toward the exit. But the seemingly small creatures quickly surrounded him. A shrill scream soon echoed through the base, and the group rushed to the warehouse to rescue him. When they broke through the door and entered, they found nothing inside. Everyone cautiously observed their surroundings, and Abu noticed some movement in a distant cabinet. He carefully opened the cabinet door, and, to their shock, a swarm of monsters burst out. Fortunately, the creatures were afraid of sunlight and didn't attack them. Instead, after circling the area, they collectively flew into an underground well. Afterward, they discovered that the young disciple had already been completely devoured. This planet was far more dangerous than they had imagined. William threw a glow stick into the well, and in the dim light, they saw a massive collection of human bones at the bottom. It became clear why the expedition team had vanished. They had all perished in the cave. Riddick deduced that the team must have been attacked by these creatures. The warehouse door was thick and heavy, so they likely hid in the cellar, but they forgot to lock the door, and the creatures turned them into food. The massive beasts they saw at the graveyard earlier had probably also been wiped out by these creatures. However, it seemed the creatures could only move in the dark, as none of them had been seen outside in the daylight. William concluded that as long as they acted during the day, they wouldn't be in any danger, but this left the group puzzled. This planet had 3 suns, so how could the creatures have come out? That's when Carolyn discovered that the samples in the base showed the date had stopped exactly 22 years ago to the day, and a sense of foreboding crept over her. Something must have happened back then that accelerated the monster's appearance. Suddenly, a thought struck her, and she hurriedly began rotating the planetary simulator in front of her. When Carolyn rotated the planetary model to the 22-year mark, the celestial bodies miraculously aligned in a straight line. She suddenly realized the truth. Every 22 years, the light from the 3 suns is blocked by a massive star and planet, creating a solar eclipse that plunges the planet into a long, terrifying night. During this time, the underground creatures emerge in full force, hunting for food. But the real issue wasn't the eclipse itself, it was the fact that today happened to be the day of the eclipse. The urgent priority now was to retrieve the batteries from the crashed ship and escape this planet as quickly as possible. However, William started scheming. He planned to use Riddick to help them, but then abandon him on the planet when they boarded the escape ship. When Carolyn heard this, she looked at him in disbelief. Riddick may have been a criminal, but so far, he hadn't harmed any of the survivors. In fact, he had exceptional piloting skills, and no matter what happened, Carolyn was unwilling to abandon Riddick. As it turned out, Riddick had already anticipated William's plot. He tells Carolyn the shocking news that William isn't actually a cop at all, but a bounty hunter. William had captured him only to collect a bounty, and he was a hypocrite capable of betraying anyone at any moment. Carolyn couldn't believe it at first. She immediately confronted William, and sure enough, everything Riddick said was true. William made no effort to hide it. He injected himself with drugs right in front of her and arrogantly admitted that he was not a real police officer. Although Carolyn was furious at William's deception, they had more pressing matters to deal with. Unfortunately, Being on the 22-year cycle was bad enough, but as soon as they stepped outside, they saw a massive planet rising over the horizon, about to block the light of the three suns. Everyone was utterly stunned, as if they were witnessing the approach of something truly terrifying. Panic spread quickly among the group. They hastily started the solar-powered vehicle and raced toward the crashed ship to retrieve the batteries. If the creatures emerged, there would be no escape, but by the time they reached the wreckage, it seemed they were already a step too late. The group rushed into the cargo hold of the wrecked ship, quickly disassembling and loading the 5 batteries. Just as they finished loading the batteries onto the vehicle, the massive planet visibly eclipsed the sun. The sky began to plunge into darkness. Could their luck get any worse? Without sunlight, the solar-powered vehicle immediately lost power and ground to a halt. They could only watch helplessly as, in the distance, countless flying creatures roared up from the underground, filling the sky in an instant. The scene was breathtakingly grand, even carrying a strange, awe-inspiring beauty. The group was stunned, rooted to the spot, until the swarm of creatures, like a tornado, began rushing toward them. Only then did they snap back to reality and drag the batteries toward the cargo ship. Riddick and Sharon lagged behind, coming under attack from the monsters. Luckily, they reacted quickly and dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding the assault. Riddick remained calm, staying low to the ground without getting up. However, Sharon, terrified and ignoring Carolyn's warnings, insisted on getting up and running toward the cargo ship. She hadn't gone far before the second wave of creatures struck. With a single scream, Sharon's body was torn apart and devoured by the swarm in an instant. The others were paralyzed with fear, but the worst was yet to come. As the darkness fully engulfed the planet, Riddick removed his goggles and, using his night vision, saw that the tall sand pillars in the distance were being shattered from within by the creatures. Even larger monsters were emerging from underground. Seeing this, Riddick chose not to mention it to the others, fearing it would cause even more panic. He quickly led everyone into the pitch-black cargo ship, and they began discussing how to transport the batteries back to the base ship. But outside, the anxious growls of the creatures could be heard, and strange noises started emanating from the damaged cargo ship. It was clear the monsters had already locked onto them. Fear gripped the group as they frantically pried open an iron door to find a safer place to hide. Yet monsters were everywhere. In desperation, Riddick used a welding torch to cut an opening, and the group quickly crawled through, sealing it up behind them. However, the ship was badly damaged, and they couldn't be sure if the creatures had already gotten inside. As Riddick felt his way through the darkness, he saw a monster not far away, easily making its way into the ship. Riddick quickly disappeared into the shadows. At that moment, another young disciple accidentally found himself face to face with the creature. Riddick urgently warned him not to move, explaining that the creatures typically couldn't see anything that remained still. But as the monster's 40-foot claws drew closer, the young disciple couldn't handle the pressure. Panicking, he turned and tried to run for his life. As expected, within seconds, the monster struck him down with lightning speed. Riddick was also spotted by another creature and quickly bolted, leading the monster directly toward the group. As the creature lunged, William hastily fired several rounds, finally managing to kill it. Only then did the group get a close look at the monster. When the light shone on its body, they saw its skin instantly scorch and burn. No wonder it feared the sunlight. It became clear that light was their key to survival. The group then gathered around the fire to discuss their escape plan. Carolyn suggested using light to fend off the creatures and get back to the ship as soon as possible. Paris, however, argued that it would be difficult, as their solar-powered vehicle was now useless. The only way to carry the batteries back to the base ship would be on foot, but traveling in the dark was incredibly risky. William believed that since the creatures feared light, they should wait for the sun to rise. The ship's various fuel sources could provide enough light for a full day. However, Carolyn countered, explaining that the eclipse would last more than a day. If they just waited, once the fuel ran out, they would all be dead. She insisted that they had to bring the batteries back to the ship and take off as quickly as possible. The group realized one fatal problem: they couldn't navigate in the dark. Carolyn looked at Riddick, trusting that his night vision could help guide them safely. Though some voiced objections, no better plan emerged, so they decided to take a gamble and spring into action immediately. By this time, the area outside the ship was swarming with creatures. Fortunately, the group had light sources to protect themselves, and the monsters didn't dare attack outright.
Riddick.
Looks clear.
You said clear.
I said it looks clear.
What's it look like now?
Looks clear.
Following the plan, everyone gathered all available light sources and lit alcohol-soaked torches. They also connected the ship's fluorescent tubes to the batteries, wrapping them around their bodies for extra light. Once everything was ready, Riddick led the way, using his night vision to scout ahead, while the rest of the group stayed close to the light, pulling the heavy batteries on a cart as they embarked on what felt like a suicide mission. With Riddick at the front, the group sprinted toward the base ship. Monsters roamed around them, circling the group and following from behind. At first, everyone worked together, moving quickly through the creatures, and they managed to cover half the distance, but then some team members began causing trouble. Paris liked to drink and couldn't help but take a sip of wine during his escape. While grabbing his drink, he accidentally dropped one of the glow sticks. A young girl nearby saw this and immediately bent down to retrieve it, removing the light tube from her body. A creature seized the opportunity and pounced on her. William, seeing this, quickly fired a few shots to protect her. Though the girl was unharmed, the already fragile group began to panic. Paris, completely losing his nerve, ran off in a blind panic, dragging his light source with him. In his frantic escape, he ripped the connection between the batteries and the light tubes. In an instant, all the lights went out, plunging everyone into total darkness. The monsters immediately surrounded them, and Paris soon got her comeuppance. Paris lit his lighter and stared blankly at the blood on his hands, finally realizing his fate. Accepting that the end was near, he wasn't afraid anymore. With a calm demeanor, he took a swig of his whiskey and then spit it out toward the flame, casting a bright glow around him. That's when he saw the horrific creatures standing all around him. Before he could even scream, Paris was torn apart by the creatures, devoured in seconds. The rest of the group, knowing the monsters feared light, quickly ignited bottles of alcohol, and their surroundings were once again illuminated. They breathed a sigh of relief, thankful the creatures hadn't yet overwhelmed them. However, Riddick's face remained grim. Through his night vision, he could see everything clearly. More and more creatures were closing in, drawn by the scent of human blood. Their hunger had made them more frenzied than ever. In the dark, the sound of teeth gnashing against bone echoed ominously. The group grew increasingly anxious, pulling out their last reserves of alcohol to make oil lamps, hoping to press onward. But Riddick saw little hope ahead. The valley in front of them was filled with these monsters, and they were growing increasingly violent. The creatures were fixated on them because they were bloodthirsty, and as it turned out, one of the group members was bleeding. William insisted that Carolyn wasn't injured, but Riddick's gaze shifted to Jack, who was standing next to Carolyn. It was then revealed that Jack, disguised as a boy, was actually a girl, and she happened to be on her period. The blood was attracting the creatures, making it incredibly dangerous to bring her through the valley. This realization stumped the entire group. After everything they'd been through, even Carolyn felt fear creeping in. She suggested they turn back and return to the cargo ship. William, however, exploded in anger. "You're the one who insisted we move forward, and now halfway through, you want to turn back? You're playing with our lives."
She is the captain. You should listen to her.
Listen to her? When she was so willing to sacrifice us all.
What's he talking about?
Does not help us.
During the crash, she tried to blow the whole passenger cabin. Tried to kill us in our sleep.
Shut your mouth!
We are fucking disposable.
What
We're
is
just
he
walking
talking
ghosts,
about?
you aren't.
Shut your fucking blowhole!
Fine, fine! You've made your point.
Though the truth about Jack was out, it didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered was that they had to keep moving. The remaining 6 members slowly entered the valley, with Riddick and William leading the way. They were only 800 meters from the base, and as long as they could cross the valley, they would reach the ship. But the valley was pitch black and eerily quiet, making it seem deceptively safe. The quiet, however, only heightened William's fear. He then came up with a vile plan. Since the creatures were so bloodthirsty, he suggested that Riddick kill the young girl Jack and use her body as bait at the entrance to the valley. That way, they could distract the creatures long enough for the others to reach the ship safely. Riddick considered the idea and seemed to like it, casting a glance back toward the group. Sensing the tension, William locked eyes with Riddick. The two men understood each other well. They couldn't fully trust one another, and both were scheming against the other. The situation quickly escalated into a fight. While Riddick was known for being ruthless and opportunistic, he had his principles and would never harm an innocent person. Seeing the confrontation, Carolyn urged the rest of the group to keep moving. In terms of fighting ability, it was clear that the two men would need time to settle the score. Time was running out, so Riddick immediately discarded the lights on his body. The night was his territory, and with his night vision, he had the upper hand. He swiftly pulled out a knife and knocked the weapon from William's hand. quickly bringing him to the ground. However, William, being an elite bounty hunter, managed to gain the upper hand momentarily, but in the end, Riddick's skills prevailed. Without hesitation, he delivered a fatal stab to William. Though wounded, William managed to grab his gun and load it quickly, but by then, the flare stick had burned out, plunging the surroundings into darkness. Riddick vanished into the night, making it impossible for William to aim. His fate was sealed. A creature swooped down from above, followed by another that impaled him through the chest. Riddick watched indifferently. William's real motive for capturing Riddick had been to cash in on the high bounty. The reason William hadn't killed him earlier was because Riddick was worth more alive than dead. Now, with his head crushed by the creatures, William met his deserved end. Riddick soon rejoined the group, but William's disappearance made them wary. Riddick, however, volunteered to carry the heavy energy batteries, and with no better alternative, the group didn't object. What they didn't realize was that Riddick cared more about the batteries that could power the ship than saving the group. Riddick had discovered the monsters' visual blind spots by examining their skeletons. As they set off again, the canyon was teeming with creatures, making passage a new challenge. But the canyon was the only route to the base. Riddick instructed everyone to gather their strength for a sprint, protecting the girl by placing her in the center, while he struggled at the back, dragging the batteries. The sky above them was swarming with creatures, but luckily, the group's makeshift barrier of burning alcohol bottles kept them safe from attack. As they pressed on, Carolyn suddenly noticed the ground was covered in blue liquid. Looking up, she realized that the creatures, desperate for food, had begun to turn on each other, tearing one another apart as they hovered in the sky. The canyon became a bloody battlefield, with chunks of flesh and monster bodies raining down. Riddick, struggling with the heavy batteries, urged the others to stop staring and take advantage of the chaos to run faster. The group weaved through the giant bones of ancient creatures when, suddenly, another monster swooped down from the sky, reaching out its claws in an attempt to snatch someone from the group. When the danger struck, Riddick kept his head down, dragging the battery forward. He never stopped to save people who slowed him down. Jack tried to call out to him for help but was unfortunately attacked by a creature. Seeing this, Carolyn immediately used her flashlight to drive the creature away, the light causing its skin to sizzle and smoke. But the creature, driven by hunger, refused to let go of Jack. Riddick, hearing the girl's screams, initially didn't want to intervene, but after a brief moment, he turned back and faced the creature head-on with his bare hands, grabbing the creature by its antennae. Just as it was about to deliver a deadly blow, Riddick swiftly slashed at it with his knife. With several quick cuts, the creature was gutted, collapsing to the ground, dead. The group continued running, nearing the end of the canyon, with the ship growing closer and closer. At this time, the sky suddenly poured down rain. It was really bad weather. The already weak flames began to sputter out, and the others were on the verge of panic. They huddled against the canyon walls, desperately trying to relight the fires that were being drenched by the rain. Riddick, however, couldn't help but laugh. Fate was toying with them. His laughter had barely faded when another creature swooped down from the sky, grabbing the injured boy. He couldn't escape his fate and was quickly killed by the creature. Abu, overwhelmed with grief, let out a heart-wrenching howl. At this rate, they were all going to die here. Riddick, seeing no other option, found a small cave nearby. He urged the others to take shelter inside to avoid more of the group being picked off by the monsters. He then sealed the cave entrance with stones, while he himself continued forward alone, dragging the battery through the muddy path. Strong people never complain about their circumstances. Soon, the base came into view. Riddick, with the battery in tow, reached the docking site of the ship. Without wasting any time, he installed the battery and successfully powered up the ship. But instead of returning to rescue the remaining three, he hesitated for less than 3 seconds before closing the hatch. A fugitive like him wouldn't risk his life for people who didn't matter to him, because, in moments of desperation, survival requires selfishness. This was the hard lesson he had learned over the years through painful experience. Meanwhile, back in the cave, Carolyn and the other two were puzzled. Riddick had been gone for so long, why hadn't he returned? As they waited and waited, their fuel slowly ran out. Still, there was no sign of Riddick. They began to sense that Riddick had abandoned them. The sound of monsters grew louder and closer. What could they do now? Just as the three were sinking into despair, the ceiling of the cave suddenly brightened. It turned out that a type of bioluminescent alien creature, similar to fireflies, was living above them, emitting a soft, glowing light. This was their lifeline. The 3 survivors quickly gathered the bioluminescent alien fireflies into bottles, creating makeshift lanterns, and set off to find Riddick. At that moment, Riddick was preparing to start the ship and escape on his own. Carolyn, using the glow from her lantern, sprinted back to the base and appeared in front of Riddick. Riddick was stunned to see her. He hadn't expected Carolyn's will to survive to be so strong, and he even felt a bit of admiration for her. However, Carolyn immediately accused Riddick of being heartless, saying that abandoning them to flee was utterly dishonorable. Riddick simply laughed, admitting that he was never a good person. "What do the lives of others have to do with me?" he said. Carolyn wanted to save the 2 remaining survivors, but Riddick casually tossed the light source toward her. Carolyn knew her limits, so she pleaded with Riddick to return with her and help rescue them. Riddick, well aware of human nature's weaknesses, pointed out that in moments of extreme danger, you couldn't rely on anyone else. Depending on others to save you was a path to death. Self-reliance was the only way. He then proposed a more convenient solution. "Why don't we sell them out and just fly away together? Saving your own life isn't something to be ashamed of." Carolyn, torn and overwhelmed, began to cry, deeply conflicted. Should she save them or not? She truly didn't want to risk going back. Seeing her hesitation, Riddick made the decision for her. His words struck a chord with Carolyn, and she slowly boarded the ship. But her mind wandered back to the start of the cargo ship incident when she had almost abandoned all the passengers out of selfishness, much like Riddick was doing now, nearly dooming everyone. As the captain, trusted by her crew, Carolyn couldn't bear to make the same mistake again. This was her chance for redemption. In a sudden burst of resolve, she tackled Riddick, demanding that he join her in returning to save the others. This infuriated Riddick, who easily overpowered her and posed a sharp question: "Are you really willing to sacrifice yourself for others?" To his surprise, Carolyn answered with unwavering certainty she was willing to give her life to save others. Hearing her firm answer, Riddick had nothing left to say. Reluctantly, he agreed to accompany Carolyn back to the cave to rescue the remaining 2 survivors. However, they never anticipated what awaited them on the return trip. Though everything had been fine when they left, on their way back, they found their path blocked by creatures. With no other choice, the group held hands, using the glow from the lanterns as protection, and bravely charged forward, pushing through the swarm of monsters. Just as they were nearing the ship's docking point, a few more creatures closed in on them. This time, Riddick told the others to go ahead while he stayed behind to distract the monsters. The outcome was predictable. He was soon targeted by one of the creatures, with nowhere to escape. Riddick played a game of chicken with the monster, using its ultrasonic blind spot to his advantage and successfully deceiving it. However, just as he was about to leave, another creature appeared behind him, immediately exposing Riddick's position. The other 3 made it to the ship, but Riddick was nowhere to be seen. After waiting for a long time with no sign of him, the group assumed that Riddick had likely been devoured by the creatures. 2 of them urged Carolyn to forget about him and board the ship so they could leave. Suddenly, a distant scream echoed. It was Riddick's. By this point, Carolyn had fully embraced her role as a savior, and there was no way she could leave him to die. She rushed back, only to find Riddick having fought off many of the attacking creatures, but he was badly injured, his body covered in wounds from the monsters, and he lay helpless on the ground, unable to walk. Carolyn quickly helped Riddick to his feet, even jokingly saying, "I'd die saving the survivors, but I don't want to die saving you, Riddick." But, as it turns out, some jokes should never be made. The moment those words left her mouth, she let out a scream, her body convulsed uncontrollably, her mouth opening wide in shock as if something had pierced through her. Blood mixed with rain streamed down. A creature had swooped in and dragged her into the darkness. At that moment, Riddick was drained of all his strength, collapsing to the ground. He could never have imagined that Carolyn would sacrifice herself for him, a fugitive and murderer. For the first time, Riddick's hardened heart broke, and genuine sadness showed on his face. After safely returning to the ship, Riddick sat silently at the control panel. He didn't immediately start the ship to leave. Instead, he turned off all the lights, luring the creatures toward the ship. As they gathered around, he suddenly ignited the engines, releasing a blast of high-temperature exhaust. Just like his burning anger, the flames incinerated the surrounding creatures in an instant, reducing them to ashes. This was the last thing Riddick could do for Carolyn, a final act of vengeance in her honor. The ship successfully took off, breaking through the planet's atmosphere and heading into the vastness of space. Jack then asked Riddick a thought-provoking question: "When we encounter a military ship, and they ask about your identity, what should we say?" "We can't exactly tell them you're a murderer, right?" Riddick responded, Riddick is dead. He just died back on that cursed planet. It was clear that the death he referred to was the death of the old Riddick the cold, ruthless, and selfish man who once abandoned others to save himself. The person who killed him was Carolyn. The new Riddick had been transformed, saved by Carolyn's selfless spirit. In the end, the bloodthirsty creatures buried beneath the planet had turned the entire world into a blood-soaked hell. Those creatures likely originated from another world, possibly brought to the planet by the previous inhabitants of the research station. From the remains in the graveyard of giant beasts, it was evident that the native creatures of this planet were dinosaur-sized, and probably even more dangerous. The research team must have introduced an alien species that ultimately decimated the planet's original inhabitants. Every 22 years, this planet experiences a period of darkness, and it's likely that these creatures arrived during one of these dark cycles, surviving extinction by hiding in underground caves. The creatures evolved and multiplied, eventually cannibalizing each other and wiping out all life on the planet. I'm a movie lover. Please subscribe to my channel and we'll see you next time.